how it's supposed to feel.
What's good, everybody, and welcome back to the channel for another episode of our Madden 23 expansion draft only franchise with the San Antonio Express. It is episode 50. I'd like to start off by saying thank you for all the support that this series has gotten thus far. I thought the 50th episode would be a good time to take a few minutes and talk about the state of the franchise as well as the future of it. There's not going to be any gameplay or anything like that in this franchise, really just talking about what I want to do with the future of this franchise. So if you came for, a game, this might not be the episode for you. Instead, I brought up the video of our first draft of the series, kind of just reminisce on, the draft that was laying the foundation, I think is what I called the title of it. So in episode 0, I think it's not really in episode 0. I called it episode 0. I think without the draft, maybe it could have been in episode 0. Probably more like in episode 1. So this might, technically be episode 51. But anyway, let's get into what I wanted to talk about in this video. This San Antonio Express team currently in year 5 is undefeated. And when a team is kind of this good and just rolling teams, the interest seems to dip a little bit. That's evidenced by the views on the games in this season compared to the last couple. Just in terms of the series that I follow from my favorite YouTubers, I tend to lose a little bit of interest when the team gets really good too. So I totally understand it. I'm not, mad at the views or anything, because I understand where that comes from. Even me as a player, the creator of this series, I get a little bit bored of just playing every single game and expecting to win every single time I, hop on the stakes and play the series. I don't have any plans at all to end this series anytime soon. Honestly, I'd like to get another 50. If we can get, a series into the 100s of episodes, that would be awesome. However, I do think a change is due. I have a plan for that change, something I've come up with recently, and I just wanted to use this video as a bit of a heads up as to what that change will be, a little bit of my thought process towards it as well, just so that any big change to the series that will be coming isn't a big surprise for anyone who's come to love the series and the team as much as I have. To explain the big change I want to make, I feel like I should first explain the goals and the plans that I set out when I first started making this series from episode 1, which we're looking at right now. So this video is going to be broken out into really 3 sections. First is going to be the aforementioned goals and plans I set out when I first started making the series, when I first thought of it, whether or not I feel like I've accomplished those goals or I'm on track to. Second is where do we go from here? What are my plans for the future? And then third, it's more of a channel-wide update rather than a series-wide update. Just got a couple of the projects in the works, and I just want to give an update on that. Maybe some other mini-series videos you can expect to see soon. I also would love feedback on anything that you'd like to see in terms of a series or a mini-series or a video you'd like to see from me, as well as just a way to improve this series that this video is a part of. And so let's get into it, starting with section 1, my goals and plans from the onset of this franchise series. There's really 2 big goals that I had in mind. when I started it. The first and most important was that I wanted to highlight the cool changes that Madden made in terms of the draft classes for this game. I think when the game was just coming out and they were talking about, the changes that were going to be introduced in Madden 23, we talked a lot about the changes to the draft class. Mainly the introduction of generational prospects, something that we've seen firsthand in this series, something that I was really hoping we could see. We have two, of course, in Brandon Nash and Kevon Simmons. They have been stellar, really fun, as well as other builds of players, I guess you could say. I don't know exactly what they're called, but players with like 99 throw power at quarterback, 99 hit power at safety, 99 speed at receiver. We have one of those in Eddie Hazelton. He wasn't 99 speed, 98, but and so in terms of that goal, I think we've accomplished it, honestly. Just with the players that we mentioned, I feel like we've gotten a ton of just awesome players in the series. That's been highlighted in a draft-only series. All of the kind of different builds. We've even seen like a 99 throw power, not drafted by our team, but Madden's done a good job making the draft more interesting, and I think this series definitely highlights that. However, with the state that this team is in, right, undefeated, God Squad, whatever you want to call it, there's become less of an emphasis on the draft, right? Just because our team is already so good. Like, let's think about our draft just last year, the Year 5 draft. Our first round pick was spent on a backup defensive tackle. And so it becomes a lot harder to accomplish the goal of highlighting the draft when the draft is just been marginalized in terms of its importance so much in the series. I mean, the other picks in that draft, right? We got Vasquez, he's kind of the only guy that sees a ton of snaps from this draft class. And even he's like, what, our fourth or fifth most targeted player in our passing offense. There's even a guy in Jacob Leach who we know is superstar, and we're still not starting him just because the team is so stacked, I mean, he's technically starting in the base 4-3, but normally, like, oh, this guy's superstar? Yeah, put him in at sub linebacker instantly. So that's goal one that I had. Goal two was to have a challenging series. When I think about Madden franchises that I've watched throughout the last few years, kind of when I've gotten into Madden YouTube, oftentimes they always start out super fun, right? Because the team is struggling. And just to watch the growth of a team that started from the bottom, that's what I love. I just see so often that teams are like already good by like year 3, and just the drop off from year 1 to year 3 is just the interest just dissipates a ton in those series, and it's because these teams get really good. And so I wanted a series that would take a lot longer for me to get good because I'm imposing a challenge on myself, right? Starting with nothing and having only the draft to build up a team, you'd think it would take a long time. I think I've been a little bit disappointed because, yes, we're in year 5 with no Super Bowl yet, but it looks like it's happening this year. And honestly, it probably should have happened last year. Think of year 4, we went 15-2. I think we started 3-2 as well. So we had a 12-game regular season win streak. We won the first playoff game, and then just like a freak episode against the Bengals, they smoked us. But I honestly think we were the best team that year. Probably should have won the Super Bowl. The timeline that I had kind of envisioned, like I didn't have anything super set in stone, like this year needs to be this, that, so on and so forth. But I was kind of thinking, 2 to 3 years of being really bad, maybe 2 more years of being like super mid. All of a sudden you're at 5 years. Year 6, you're definitely a playoff team, but not quite there yet. Maybe year 7, you're a contender. So going from like maybe year 7, you should be winning the Super Bowl, to like we should have won it in year 4. That's almost cut in half of kind of the timeline that I hope to achieve in a draft-only type of series, a challenge series. So I've definitely been disappointed in that aspect of it. And I've been thinking a lot about, well, why? And I think there are 3 reasons, 2 really big ones that I think kind of need to change, and then a third that I think contributes to it, but it's not a huge bad thing. The first is the quality of the draft classes. We have had some absolutely stacked drafts in this franchise. Let's just do a little exercise for a minute here and rank the 5 draft classes that we've seen in this franchise. I think the drafts in year 3 and year 5 are the bottom 2. I don't think it really matters which order. I'd probably put 5 as lowest. And maybe it was even a good draft class. We just didn't need anybody at that time. Year 3 at 4, we'll say. I think 1 needs to be year 4. I mean, we got the MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year from that draft class when they were rookies. So it's hard to argue that that's not the best draft we've had. And that leaves drafts 1 and 2. And if you think about draft 1, we got 12? I mean, it was the first draft, so you need a bunch of starters, but I think there's 9 or 10 guys that are still starting for this team from that draft class, so really deep. Compared to year 2, where we got Kevon Simmons, Wyatt Costanzo, and Darius Conner, 2 guys that we drafted as X factors. Also Jerome Snell. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that this draft we're watching right now, the year 1 draft, was the second best draft, and the year 2 draft was the third best draft. We're talking about the medium draft, right? The two drafts are better than it, 2 drafts are worse than it. The median draft got us a generational running back, a 78 overall X factor safety, a 78 or 77 or whatever Wyatt Costanzo was edge, a good offensive lineman. That's the middle class draft. That is a great draft. I think that should, in most cases, be your best draft. And we've had 2 drafts better than it, arguably, at least 1. And so that's just crazy to me. The draft classes have been wildly good. Something I'd like to change. Of course, I don't really have much say in it unless I'm importing the draft classes myself, right? And then at that point, I'll need to calm down, but I'm not. I'm using the draft classes that were given to me. And so I just think if we were to simulate 5 years of drafts over and over again, I just don't think there's another world where the Kevon Simmons draft is ranked 3rd. I think it's always ranked 1st or maybe 2nd. The second one, and this I have complete control over, and if I had a do-over, I would do it differently. That second thing is the number of draft picks that I had in the first 2 years. If you think back, we had, in this draft that we're watching, 2 picks in rounds 1 through 3 each round, and then 3 picks in rounds 4 through 7 each round. And then the second year, Kevon Simmons draft, we had 2 picks in every round. That's 32 draft picks in the first 2 years of our franchise. And what that does is so many draft picks, all of a sudden UDFAs aren't really playing. Let's talk about by year 3, nobody was playing as a UDFA. Maybe Caleb Bass. Caleb Bass was the last one. We got him out of there real quick, with Morgan. And it just left, there was just so many options available to the team with 32 draft picks. There's really kind of 2 options in a draft if you have a normal amount of draft picks. And I'll highlight those 2 options by 2 different examples of drafts that we've had post the first 2 years when we had normal amount of drafts. The first option is to be aggressive and go up and get top end talent. That's year 4, right? We had a normal amount of draft picks. We just did a bunch of trading up. This is an extreme example, mind you. We did a bunch of trading up, including even trading players to get extra picks in this draft, because we knew we were only a couple pieces away. We could get a couple really good pieces in the draft, 2 guys that look really good. So you have the first option in a draft is to trade up, be aggressive, get a couple guys at the expense of your depth. The second is to trade back, maybe not take the top end guy. You have a lot of holes. Let's fill them. Let's take the swings at the bat, as they say, and just try to fill as many holes as we can in a single draft. That's year 3, right? Marquestin Red was at the top of the board, but the fact that he had low injury and the fact that I had a lot of defensive needs made me think, let's trade back, acquire more picks, maybe not get the best player in the class, which was Marquestin Red, and instead, get a Morris Morgan and a Jaron Lacey and a Delvin Walls, fill 3 pieces instead of just getting 1 big guy. thing about the volume of the picks that we had in the first 2 years is we did both, right? And this draft, Devon Burks, the middle linebacker, was the only guy that I didn't get that was on my list. I traded up for the guys that were higher than where I was picking. I traded back and got a ton of picks in round 4. And so you kind of got, bake your cake and eat it too. You got that situation, and it's not really ideal because it's just like too good to be true. And it just advanced our timeline a lot because by year 3, I was able to say, hey, I only need 4 starters or whatever it was, 4 or 5 starters. And it's year 3. Like year 3, I should still probably need almost half of my team. You know what I mean? And so that's something that's under my control. If I could do it again, I would do it differently. And we will do it again. Madden 24, I plan to do another series just like this. And then the third, and I think by far the least impactful of the reasons, is that we started with a full coaching tree. Like it was already established by the time year 1 started. Right, we had the 6 focus players, we had the extra experience points, we had everybody get an XP like they were a scheme fit. All of that by the time we've hiked the ball for the first time in this series. And yeah, that contributed. I don't know if that alone really does a ton, because every team has an opportunity to do that, right? Not every team has the opportunity to have 32 draft picks in 2 years, but every team can have a full coaching staff tree. You have to also factor in mentors in that, but also every team can have mentors. The goal of this franchise was to make it difficult to build a roster because I could only use the draft, not make it difficult to develop the guys that I did draft. So that's why I'm kind of okay with the fact that we had a full coaching tree. And if I went back in time and started this again for the first time, I would still do that. And so that's kind of my goals when I set out to start this franchise and where I think we're at with them. That being said, right, I felt like we accomplished one goal, but it's kind of all of a sudden becoming irrelevant. And then another goal we didn't accomplish. What does that mean for the future of the franchise? That brings us to section 2 of this video. And yeah, where does that leave us in this franchise? I feel like a lot of what I set out to do, highlight the draft, have a challenging franchise, that's all over. Is the series done? No, it can't be done because I am way too invested into the players that we've collected to just end it out of the blue. I want to see through the careers of a lot of these guys, most of these guys, but at the same time, I don't want to play the next 5+ seasons just winning every game. In terms of superficial fixes, I don't know if just a slider change is going to be enough. I also don't mind the places that the sliders are. I could change them a little bit, but I like when the game plays according to ratings, right? The first few years, we were losing a ton because we sucked. Even in year 3, I was winning in some of my games, but we were losing in simulation because my team was worse. We should have been losing in simulation. Now that we're better than every team, we should be winning. I don't want to have to sweat out every win against a team that's 12 overall lower than us, because at that point, does even building a good team matter? I want building a good team to matter, and I think this slider set does a decent job at that. Another thing that could become an issue is affording everyone, right? The cap is going to be very tight here in the next couple of years. I don't know if that totally solves the problem though, because I think at most that frees up 2, 3, at most 4 slots. All of a sudden you kind of need to refresh the draft. I don't know if that's enough to keep me and you invested. So I recently thought of the idea that I plan to implement in this franchise that will allow me to both follow the careers of all these San Antonio Express without having to play, the episode after episodes of blowouts. And the idea is this: what if I created some storyline, that part isn't figured out yet, that led to another team being expanded, and I took over that team, we go from there. That allows us to watch, the Express from a distance. We can look at their stats, see how they're progressing in terms of ratings and developments. and really just track the careers of the favorites like Lewis Smart, Kevon Simmons, George McLean. I don't know if you guys like George McLean. I love George McLean. But this also has the side benefit of giving me another look at this draft-only formula and refining it and ahead of, a new series in, say, Madden 24. Because like I said, I think one of the main reasons this team got too good too fast is because I gave myself way too many draft picks. And so if I tried it again, gave myself less draft picks, I don't know how many draft picks I would give myself. I'd have to think that over, but I'd probably even go maybe on the super low end side to see if that's enough, right? And then in Madden 4, I could say, oh, this wasn't enough. I need to give myself more, something like that. You know what I mean? And see if it gives me the results kind of close to the timeline. I don't need it to be like a strict timeline. Like, oh man, if we're competing for a Super Bowl before year 7, the formula doesn't work. It just felt like there was 1 year where we weren't terrible, like worst team in the league. We went from like worst team in the league first 2 years to best team in the league, and there was one tiny little year in there. Like, that just seems weird to me, and I think it was because we had so many people that were already on the development track, and once they developed and we started winning, it skyrocketed. And so what would I need to be able to be willing to move off the Express and go to another team? At the very least, I would need to win a Super Bowl with the Express. I'm not leaving this team Super Bowl list. That would be just kind of like super disappointing, just anticlimactic. Honestly, I'd probably like to win multiple Super Bowls with this team. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, this year we end up going undefeated. We're only 2 regular season episodes away from doing it in the regular season. And then if you win the Super Bowl, you have to go undefeated in the playoffs. You know what I mean? If you go 20-0, win the Super Bowl, is it ever going to get better than that? I mean, it pretty much can't, right? At the same time, is it going to get harder than that in any time in the near future? None of these guys are progressing or even close. They're all several years away from starting to regress their ratings. And honestly, most of them are still even progressing. They're getting better. So that kind of feels like the climax of what this team is going to be if we go undefeated. Like, there's no goal that we will not have achieved at that point. Super Bowl, undefeated, have individual awards all over the place. So if that happened this year, I would probably, if we win the Super Bowl and go undefeated this year, I'm probably moving the team like next year. If we don't, even if we win a Super Bowl, but we end up like 15-2, I don't know, something happens, I might stick around, maybe try to win a second Super Bowl, go undefeated, because that'll be a goal that we haven't accomplished with that team yet. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that, yeah, we go undefeated, we win the Super Bowl, and I decide that I want to do this next team. What would that look like? We'd have to skip a year in the league for one, just so I can get the relocation set up. And that would be like an episode where we have the storyline and we're skipping the year, I'm creating the team or whatever, and then the draft would be like the first episode with my new team or whatever that would be. And there's really 2 options of a team that I would relocate. The first would be relocating a team in the AFC West, just having another AFC West team that faces the Express twice a year, right? Just like having to play the monster that I created. Like, just once again, kind of like how I said I made the division better. The kind of a theme in the first couple of years is I just punished myself by making the teams I was playing all the time better. This would be the extreme version of it, right? I created this unstoppable monster that I have to face twice a year. So that sounds fun to me. Option 2 would be relocating a team to the NFC, into whatever the best division in the NFC is. I would have to research that. I don't know what that is yet. You could maybe think like the NFC East, because we've kind of I mean, who knows? I mean, they're really good in real life, right? But I don't know if they're going to be good in Madden. We'd have to check, right? We're 5 years into the future. I can't factor real life into this. But the benefit of that would be that we could play the Express in the Super Bowl. Now, talk about just like a climax of climax. Like, imagine, let's just say for the sake of argument, if my plan goes 100% like right and we go to the Super Bowl in year 7 and the Express are there, and it's like a series finale, whatever our team is versus the Express in the Super Bowl. That would be awesome. Like, talk about just, I think, the coolest episode ever. But you run the risk of that might never happen. We might never make it to the Super Bowl. I mean, I imagine we will, but if we do, the Express might be just kind of disbanded a lot by then, you know what I mean? And so you run that risk. So I felt like the NFC is like the high risk, high reward team. The AFC would be like the play it safe, we're playing the Express a bunch. Would definitely feel closer to the team without maybe just like being able to play them in the Super Bowl because we both be in the AFC. I'm leaning towards the AFC West just because we follow the team more consistently, the Express, I mean. And I don't know, I just don't want to make a decision based off the potential of one awesome episode years into the future, you know what I mean? Let me know what you think in the comments if you have an opinion on that. And yeah, that's pretty much my plan. Which kind of just leaves me to the last thing I want to talk about in this episode is a little bit of a channel update here, which brings up section 3. Just general channel updates in terms of what I'm working on. I have a few projects that I am working on that could develop into probably like mini series. I don't imagine them being really long series. The first is I am working on a league where every single player is in their prime. I put a ton of work into it. In fact, it was almost done. I just kind of needed to edit the last couple things. Unfortunately, I found out recently that Madden 23 removed the ability to edit players' ages and developments prior to a fantasy draft because this would be a fantasy draft league. And the fantasy draft is kind of important in this, as is like having correct ages and dev traits for these, like, because even if he's a high overall, nobody's going to draft, you know, a 34-year-old normal dev player very highly. And so that's unfortunate. I know they removed it in Madden 23 because I did this in Madden 22 and it worked. I was able to get the fantasy draft to work correctly because everyone was their correct age and dev. And it was awesome. I just kind of fooled around in it. I didn't have YouTube at that point, obviously. So the option that I'm thinking of, because right now it's kind of just stalled out. I don't want to do it if the teams aren't going to draft fantasy draft correctly, is to play that series on Madden 22. Is that something you guys would be interested in? Watching, you know, like Madden 22 just to get a good series? Or should that series just be dead? Just let me know. The other one is I have found a Madden generated generational prospect at every single position, and I want to put them all into the same draft and try my hardest to draft them all onto the same team. That would be very difficult because I know you can only have a certain amount of first round draft picks, so I'd probably just draft as many as I can, trade for the rest. If that sounds interesting to you, let me know. I also want to do some regular rebuilds, like 10-year rebuilds or 0 overall rebuilds, stuff like that. It's not my favorite way to play Madden, but I know it's a good way to attract new viewers. Much more than like, oh, this is a cool series, but it's episode 35. I don't want to tune in episode 35 of a series. I am getting growth that way, and I appreciate everyone who's come in the middle and actually gone back and watched from the beginning, because my channel has changed a lot from the beginning to now, but it's a good way to grow the channel that way. Also, tips and trick videos. Like, I want to make a video on how to optimize scouts because I see all over YouTube. It doesn't really bother me, but just scouts being used suboptimally is the word I'm trying to say. So making a video on how to actually get the most out of your scouts in Madden 23. Also generating 100 Madden drafts to look for trends in terms of like, how often should you expect a generational player? How often does 80 overall actually result in X Factor? How often does the blah, 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 blah? How often do you get a guy with 99 hit power? Just all these different things. Just look for trends. So if there are any Madden draft trends that you want to find or know about or whatever, let me know. And when I start doing that, that's going to take a ton of prep work too. I have to generate and analyze 100 different Madden generated drafts. Just other tips and tricks, videos, stuff like that. If there's any video series idea that you would like to see happen, let me know. I'm not guaranteed to do it, right? I might say, nah, that doesn't sound very fun to me or whatever, but I would always appreciate feedback. Or if you just have an idea that will help improve this draft-only franchise, I'm definitely open to those as well. That's all I have for this video. Thanks for tuning into this series and channel update. I'll be back with more next week, and I will see you then.